You have heard the story of Ruth as a polite, quiet Sunday school romance. But do you know the surprising truth in that story? The book of Ruth isn't a romance novel at all. It is a high-stakes legal thriller. Picture this. You have lost absolutely everything. Your bank account is drained to zero, your spouse has passed away, and now you are walking away from the only home you've ever known, moving to a foreign country where you have no job, no friends, no connections, and zero legal rights. This isn't just ancient history. This is the visceral feeling of hitting absolute rock bottom. It's a story about a devastating economic crisis, a desperate midnight gamble, and a specific loophole in ancient law that changed the course of history. Today, we are uncovering the hidden legal system behind Ruth and Boaz, how ancient redemption laws actually worked, and why this quiet love story ends up changing the entire narrative of the Bible. To understand the magnitude of this story, you first have to look at the world they were living in. This was the time of the Judges, a period often called the Dark Ages of Israel's history. The Bible describes it as a time when everyone did what was right in their own eyes. There was no king, endless tribal wars, massive instability, and spiritual chaos. Imagine a world with absolutely no social safety net, no welfare, no 401k, no life insurance, no GoFundMe campaigns. In this ancient culture, a woman's economic survival depended entirely on the men in her family, her husband or her sons. They owned the land. They provided the physical protection. Without them, you weren't just single, you were destitute. So when Naomi's husband and both her sons die in the land of Moab, she and her daughter-in-law Ruth aren't just grieving, they are economically doomed. Naomi returns to Bethlehem bitter and empty. She actually tells people, "Don't call me Naomi," which means pleasant. "Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt bitterly with me." And Ruth, she is a Moabite, a foreigner from an enemy nation. She has 2 strikes against her. She's a widow and she's an unwanted outsider. They are walking into a life of almost guaranteed poverty. This brings us to the first layer of depth we usually miss. Why is Ruth even here? Naomi told her to stay in Moab. She told her, "Go back to your mother's house. I have nothing for you. I have no more sons to give you." In fact, the other daughter-in-law, Orpah, does go back, and that was the logical, sensible choice. But Ruth's refusal to leave is shocking. She says, "Where you go, I will go. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God." We hear that verse at weddings all the time. But remember, this wasn't spoken to a husband. It was spoken to a bitter, destitute mother-in-law who was trying to get rid of her. It's like leaving a stable job, your family, and your home country to move somewhere you don't speak the language, with no guarantee of income, just to take care of someone who can never pay you back. That is what the Bible calls hesed. It's a loyalty that defies logic. It's not a feeling, it's a ferocious commitment. Ruth chooses exile and poverty because she refuses to abandon Naomi. But here is the hard reality. Loyalty doesn't put food on the table. They are starving, and that need drives Ruth to the fields to try and survive. Ruth goes out to glean. Now, this is our second key concept, the economic system of God's law. God had commanded landowners not to harvest the corners of their fields and not to pick up any grain that fell to the ground. It was an ancient safety net. Think of it like a mandatory tax buffer in your paycheck, money automatically set aside for someone in need. It preserved the dignity of the poor. They had to work for it, but the opportunity was guaranteed by law. Enter Boaz. He is a wealthy landowner, a man of standing. In a time when most men were doing whatever they wanted, Boaz enters the field and greets his workers with, "The Lord be with you." When he sees Ruth, he doesn't just follow the law, he breaks the norm. He tells his workers to purposefully drop extra grain for her. If he only needed to follow the minimum legal requirement, why go beyond it? This is where you see Boaz's true character. He recognizes Ruth's hesed, her loyalty to Naomi, and he matches it with grace. He offers her protection in a field where a foreign woman could easily be assaulted. He treats her like family before she even asks. When Ruth comes home with weeks' worth of food in one day, Naomi realizes something incredible. This man, Boaz, isn't just a generic rich guy. He is a relative, and that changes everything. This brings us to the deepest layer of the story, the Kinsman-Redeemer system. Naomi hatches a plan. She sends Ruth to the threshing floor to uncover Boaz's feet. Now, let's clear this up. In modern Western culture, this sounds weird or even scandalous, but in that culture, it was a dramatic legal petition. In ancient Israel, a goel, or kinsman-redeemer, was a close relative who had the legal right to buy back family land that had been sold due to poverty and essentially save the family from extinction. By uncovering his feet and lying there, Ruth is symbolically asking, "Will you cover me with your protection? Will you take on the responsibility of our family?" She is effectively proposing marriage to him. Boaz understands immediately. He says yes. But there's a catch. There is another relative closer than him, a man who has first dibs on the property. This is where the legal thriller peaks. Boaz approaches the other relative at the town gate. He offers him Naomi's land. The man says, "Great, I'll redeem it. It's a good investment." He gets more acreage for his estate. But then Boaz drops the hammer. Boaz says, "On the day you buy the land, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite to raise up the name of the dead on his inheritance." The other man backs out immediately. Why? Because it's a bad financial move. If he marries Ruth and they have a son, that son inherits the land, not the other man's existing children. It dilutes his own estate. It's like inheriting a massive debt and choosing to pay it off, knowing you won't keep the asset. But Boaz, he doesn't care about the cost. He risks his money, his reputation, and his inheritance to redeem Ruth and Naomi. He chooses people over profit. He pays a price he didn't technically owe to save a family that couldn't save themselves.
Boaz marries Ruth. They have a son, Obed. And the women of the town tell Naomi, "He shall be to you a restorer of life." The emptiness is filled. The bankruptcy is redeemed. The bitterness is turned to joy. But here is the final twist that makes this story explode with meaning. Next time you read Ruth, don't just see a love story. See a blueprint. This baby, Obed, becomes the grandfather of King David. And eventually, from this line comes Jesus. An outsider, a Moabite widow, becomes a mother of the Messiah. It shows us that God uses the marginalized, the loyal, and the faithful to weave his biggest plans. And ultimately, it shows us a picture of the true Redeemer, Jesus, who paid a debt he didn't owe to save us when we were bankrupt. If this new perspective on Ruth surprised you, hit like and subscribe for more hidden stories behind everyday verses. And I want to know, what part of Ruth's story feels most personal to you? Her loyalty or the need for a fresh start? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.